the purpose of the rapid assessment from the city competitiveness and economic development point of view perspective.
Okay. Speaking of what is the purpose of doing the competitiveness assessment within this exercise, well, first of all, I think that when we think of sustainability, traditionally the first thing that comes up in our thinking is environmental sustainability, which is fair enough. That's kind of the most popularized aspect of the concept. But I think it's important, once we try to think of sustainability of development holistically, economic development as competitiveness is a crucial element of that. If we look at what that means for the reality of a given city, it's things like, will the city be able to sustain the rates of growth, the growing incomes for the population, the jobs for the youth? Or is the way that the city has been developing compromising its development in the future, be it through depleting its natural environment, or depleting its social resources, or the budget of the local municipality? So from that angle, understanding what are the drivers of local economy and what are the drivers likely to be in the future and what kind of economic activity the city can generate becomes essential for assessing how sustainable the selected model of development is and how it can be adjusted in the future and what's the role of government in this process.
Second question, how can the outcomes of this rapid assessment from that perspective add value to Malaysia city planning as a whole?
Well, I mean, ultimately, any analytical exercise is not just done for the sake of publishing a paper. What we want to do is inform policy making and decision making at all levels. And I think ultimately we want to move from understanding the current situation, the current outcomes, to thinking through the process of policy making implementation that exists in Malaysia and Malacca specifically, and produces the outcomes that we're observing today. So hopefully through this exercise we'll be able to come up with a set of recommendations on improving both the way the planning process works and the way implementation locally is arranged and organized, and hopefully that will end up with more informed policy decisions and implementation process that will help improve sustainability and economic competitiveness of the city in the future.
First question, the purpose of the rapid assessment from the urban economy, climate change and environment perspectives.
Well, I think this is quite an interesting opportunity to try and look at a city in the round. So quite often when you assess specific activities in a city, you might be looking just at climate change, just at resilience, just at urban economy, just at infrastructure provision. And actually this project, because we're looking at all of the sectors and we have experts from both Malaysia and further afield, we can come together into one room and try and look at all the different interrelationships between those different sectors and look at how we can achieve something better by working together and looking at how they interrelate with one another and how we can actually achieve greater efficiency in the work we're doing. And in a country like Malaysia, which has a very, very strong tradition of detailed national, local and regional planning, actually this is a really good pilot where we can try this out in a country where actually you can take this forward and implement it. In many other countries, they don't have the same sophisticated planning system that you do here in Malaysia, and actually we can try it here and then apply it to other countries so they can learn from the experience here in Malacca.
That's good. And the second question, how can the outcomes of this rapid assessment, from your perspective, add value to Malaysia's city planning as a whole, in general?
I think that the outcome of this rapid assessment can add a lot of value to the wider national planning process, because actually Malacca is at the forefront of quite significant change over the next few decades, with huge amounts of population and economic growth forecast. So actually all of the challenges that Malaysia is going to face in the next few decades are writ large here in Malacca. So everything, whether it's engaging with local industries, whether it's developing a tourist economy, whether it's looking at ways to mitigate the impacts of climate change, are all happening here. So actually there's a really good opportunity for this to be a test bed to actually allow other cities in Malaysia and further afield to learn from what's going on here. And I think the real area of focus needs to be on implementation. So actually what we need to do when we're taking this information from rapid assessment is to identify actual projects, actual interventions and actual policy changes so that actually we can try and implement some of the things that we're talking about.
This is the rapid assessment from the perspective of urban planning, design and inform.
Yeah. First, Malacca is going to go through a huge transformation within the next 2 decades, with an increase of population by 70%, forecasted multiplication by 3 of the GDP, and the multiplication by 2 of the GDP per capita. So moving from upper middle income country to high income country. And a transformation from an economy dominated by industry, about 50%, to an economy dominated by services and more open to the outside with the 7 ports. So it's a huge transformation. Okay? At the same time, there are issues like low density, a flat profile of density. The density is not structured with jobs concentrated and agglomerated in, but more like a flat profile, not corresponding to the challenges and the new needs and opportunities of an economy of services more open to the world. So the rapid assessment is going to look at the opportunity of reshaping the urban form with a more efficient urban form. So, because one of the issues of having a non-efficient urban form is to have social costs, because you reduce opportunity of jobs for people, you increase transportation needs, you increase transportation costs, you increase infrastructure costs, you open land for development and for urbanization, which then you have to service with infrastructure. You don't have necessarily the financing for infrastructure. So it's a huge transformation involving financing, involving risk, climate change risk, involving vulnerability of populations, involving integration of rural migrants into the city. And special form has a key role to play in making this happen in the most efficient way.
And the second question is, how can the outcomes of the rapid assessment add value to Malaysia's city planning in general?
Yeah, so, well, the problems or the issues and the challenges and the opportunities Malacca is encountering are, in a sense, generic to most Malaysian cities. Malacca is doing pretty well, Malaysian cities are doing pretty well, but they all have one step ahead in the urban transformation. So, working on the most efficient urban form, for increasing Malacca competitiveness and openness to the world and inclusiveness, even if it goes well, can be still have room for improvement, facing new challenges. And I think the lessons can be really useful for all the cities. In particular, the integration of different levels of planning between the national, federal, city, the way of playing with adjusting plot ratios for introducing new methods like TOD, because there is a discussion about TOD, but not necessarily the tools and instruments put in place for actual implementation. Land value capture is also a fantastic opportunity of financing the new infrastructures. So Malacca can become a kind of laboratory of new instruments that could be useful for the rest of Malaysia.